Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm very excited to have Charles Tinsley on the call today. And Charles is with the Key Guild and he is an expert in valuing stuff. So you know how your house is full of stuff and some of it you think is maybe worth quite a bit of money and some of it you think maybe is worth nothing. But a lot of times we're wrong. We don't really know just how much that stuff might be worth, but Charles knows. And that's why we have him on the call. Charles, thanks so much for joining me today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited about being on and getting to talk about this subject. It's my favorite subject as well. So I've been in the collectibles world for going on 20 years now. I wore a number of different hats. Everything has led me to this place where I am now of doing collectibles advising. It's a new industry specialty. It's a little bit unique because we, as collectibles advisors, act as advocates for our clients, helping people understand what's going on in this industry, which things they have may have value, which ones don't, and trying to make sure they don't accidentally squander something by selling it in the wrong venue. So just using all the resources we can, experts, relationships, auction houses, to help these folks have a much better idea of the treasures they have in their home, and oftentimes maybe the treasures they don't have in their home. Just giving them good information they can use to make that next step.
Right on. Okay, because I know a lot of people really, have a lot of stuff in their home that they're always wondering what's it worth, and a lot of times it turns out that it's maybe worth less than they thought it was worth. So, how would you describe the current state of like the secondary market for collectibles today?
Let me let me start out by saying what I consider a collectible,
Oh,
because
good.
as a
Yes.
collectibles advisor, it's important to understand that because most people tend to think of a collectible as that better thing that they have, that important painting, that rare bottle of wine, that collectible thing. But as a collectibles advisor, we look at a collectible as anything that a person has accumulated somewhere along their journey, and for one reason or another, they still have it. It may have no value, or it may have great value, but in any case, they have to make a decision about what to do with it. So when we say collectible, we're really just talking about stuff, the stuff that people have kept and have in their home. The market, in a word, is bad. It's been bad for a very long time. It continues to decline. It started with the millennial generation. The first generation that came along decided they have no interest in parents and grandparents stuff, and they didn't mind voicing that. As that has continued, other generations, even their parents, my generation, began to say, well, if you don't want it, I don't want it. So there is this glut of material out there because people are getting rid of things and there's not enough people to buy it. So this continues to be a problem. Just to give you an idea, as an appraiser, we used to be able to use data that might be a few years old. These days, we really need to find data that's a few months old, or it's probably out of date. It's probably declined since that time. So it's just been a real change in sentiment towards stuff, more of a liability than a luxury or a benefit.
Well, that's interesting. That's really interesting. So, just curious, where do you get that data from? Are there like websites that like have like the auction prices for various categories of stuff, or how does that work?
Well, like so many things, the internet has tons of resources these days. The thing we have to be careful about is I can tell you places, even eBay's historic sales options. Anything that you look up on eBay, you can go over to the left side toolbar and find completed sales and find out, well, what did these things really sell for, not what people are asking. So eBay has a wonderful tool that covers a lot of material. There are sites like Live Auctioneers, which is an online platform that auctions all over the country, even other countries use, to get an online audience bidding against their live floor bidders. So when those auctions are done, all that data stays on there. So we can look at current sales that are going on, but more importantly, we can look at historic sales for the items we're looking at, find out what did they sell for in small, medium, and large auction houses. So those are two great examples. Those two alone can give most people a pretty good idea of what value range something they have that they're looking for.
Right. So that's pretty interesting. So like eBay, and do you find that a lot of people actually end up selling stuff on eBay or like not really so much because it's kind of hard to sell on eBay?
Well, it just means, we would talk about something we call them smalls, something that's shippable. We wouldn't sell antique furniture on eBay. It just doesn't make sense, the shipping or the transport. Although there are a lot of people that sell vehicles, there's a whole industry for shipping that. But most of the things that we sell on eBay are these classic collectibles, just almost anything you can think of that you've got sitting around somewhere in your home has probably been sold on eBay and probably in the last week or so. So tons of material. It's still the big dog. Nothing has come close to dethroning eBay. When it comes to the bigger stuff, that's where the live auction results become important to us because quite often the auctions that the data we're finding may be community auctions in people's area where they live. So it makes sense that they could get that furniture or that larger item to their local community auction, and we can see that result. And that result, oftentimes, for common stuff, is similar to what an estate sale or tag sale would achieve. So it's pretty important information for that.
All right, right on. So what items are actually like hot right now? And what are like, I mean, like I heard somewhere, someone told me that like the crystal, like cut crystal, right? Like people paid a lot of money for cut crystal back in the day, and that today it's virtually worthless. So, but what is hot, and what are some things that people think are really valuable that actually are just basically junk at this point?
Let's start out with what's not hot, and that would be a good category would be anything formal dining. So, so all those things that would be in your formal dining room, including the furniture, the table and chairs, the china hutch, the cabinet. Many people have to give that away to get rid of it, to get it out of their house as they're selling their home. The things that go in those cabinets, china, crystal, plated silver, all those things that go along with formal dining, it's almost obsolete. So very few people want it. You can't hardly sell a set of china, but if you wanted to sell your set of china one piece at a time on eBay, you might get it sold for a little bit more because no one's buying a new set of china, but they are buying a replacement piece here and there or adding a set or setting to that. So generally speaking, things like formal dining things are just flat, almost dead. Large dark wood antique furniture. The more antique it looks, the less of an audience we have, the less interest the younger generation has in it. So old, big, dark wood furniture is terribly hard to get rid of. Pianos, organs, these type of musical instruments, a high percentage of those in the market today have to be given away because of the cost associated with moving them and tuning them and so on. Grandfather clocks. So think, armoires, anything that's big like that. Most young folks and most people today don't want to give wall space. They're treating it almost like retail shelf space. They're not going to give it up for something unless it's pretty special. And for most people, less is more today. So all of that type of material is pretty rough. The older smalls like Hummels, little figurines, very tough. All the folks who decorated with the ornamental plates on the wall, no one is using plates as art anymore. This The sad fact is, for most of my clients, I would say 95% of the stuff they own will go through an estate sale, and they'll just simply get whatever the market will bear. So that gives you a pretty good idea of the things that the market are tough on. Now, what's hot? Obviously, right now as we're speaking, gold and silver are hanging around historic highs. We've never experienced anything like this. Gold's around $4,000 an ounce. That's incredibly high. Silver hit a new all-time high in the last few weeks. So all those things that we have that are made of precious metals like jewelry, silver coins, sterling flatware and serviceware, all these things are great items to get rid of right now because of the intrinsic value of what they're made out of. So those are great things. And then you have just fun things like vinyl records and the old stereo systems we used to play them on. Those have had a bit of a rebirth. And so a lot of people are enjoying the old stereo systems and the old rock albums that we used to play on those. So that's one that may be a little bit more popular. Um, Things like Pokemon cards and the old video games and cartridges. We used to look at sports memorabilia, baseball trading cards as being the really hot commodity for a lot of collectors. But in recent years, we've seen Pokemon cards sell for $300,000 to $400,000. We've seen um, old Nintendo games. One sold a few years back for over $1.5 million. So think what I'm 65. What were my kids, the millennials, playing with when they were kids? Well, they were playing with Pokemon cards and Nintendo games. They're also hitting that age of about 43 to 44 years old. So a lot of them are beginning to make more money. And they're hitting that age where most generations will start spending that extra money on things that they like to surround themselves with. And quite often that's things from their youth. So it gives you a little bit of a target of, well, what would be popular for this generation? And of course, for a collector, it may be things that they enjoyed when they were younger. So those are just some things to give you an idea of what may be surprisingly hot, and of course all the other things that are just terribly hard to get rid of.
So what you're telling me, and this is hard for me to believe, but the millennials are basically driving the market for collectibles today. It's like what they don't want is the things that people used to want, like 20 or 30 years ago. And now
Mm-hmm.
all the plastic crap that they grew up with, that's what's really popular and selling for really high prices right now. Do I have that right?
We certainly have examples where that is exactly right. It's amazing if you want to just get in the weeds a bit. You stop and think, how did one generation come along without planning, without talking amongst themselves and making a decision? How do we feel about stuff? How do we feel about our parents and grandparents' stuff? It was just this symbiotic thing that happened nationwide with this generation that came along that just simply all at the same time decided, generally speaking, we really don't want to surround ourselves with some things that were part of someone else's journey, our parents or grandparents. It's not that we don't care, it's just not anything that reflects our journey in our life. And it's very interesting to note that in a podcast I was on in Great Britain last year, I believe it was, I was explaining that to them, assuming it was not the case there. And yet they said it's the exact same thing there. So you have this one generation internationally came along and decided we don't want people's stuff. So, I think a lot about it. I think the one thing they all have in common is their parents' generation, which was the boomers, my generation. There must be something in the way we communicated our either lack of interest or lack of appreciation for things that they must have picked up on. It had to come from us. I don't believe they could have just come up with it on their own. So we could talk a lot about that, but that's my theory.
All right, good theory. Well, so let's just say that because this happens to me all the time, right? So like someone is 75, 80 years old, right? And they are ready to downsize and they have all this stuff and they think it's worth so much money, but they're not gonna like put it up on eBay or they're not gonna auction it off or whatever. So what should someone in that situation do? What's your advice? Are there like, do you do that kind of work? Do you come into people's houses? Are there people like you all across the country? How does that work?
Well, actually, that's why I created collectibles advising as an industry specialty because um, it's interesting to know there's a lot of people that have a ton of knowledge and information. Almost all of those people have a solution. It may be someone who knows a lot about baseball trading cards, but they either have their own shop or they may be the expert at an auction house and they really don't have another solution to offer you if your goods are not something that they would take or other than themselves. So having someone like a collectibles advisor who comes in and says, I'm not the solution. However, I am surrounded by people who have this knowledge and experience that we can reach out and figure out uh, which is the best combination of solutions to help you get the most for your stuff. So that's why I created Keys Guild. Our members, which we call Keys, are in markets around the country. Usually, they may be someone who owns a downsizing business, like a senior move managing company. It may be a professional organizer. It may be a realtor. It might be a trust attorney. All these different folks that are working with this clientele, are these elderly clients. This is a service that they add, an expertise that they add so that they can bring to bear a lot more knowledge and resource. The sad thing is we're still young and there's not collectibles advisors in every market. So you have to begin to use what's available. You may have to talk with your local estate sale company, find out what they can work with, what they think the value is of your items, how knowledgeable they are. You may talk to local dealers if there's certain topics. If you have a painting that is concerning you, you might talk to your local gallery or art specialty auction house. Try to do a little bit of research, a little bit of legwork to get someone who knows more about it than you to help you. So we just have to use the resources that are available to us.
So a lot of people I happen to know don't trust the estate sale companies, right? They they think that they're going to get ripped off by the estate sale companies, and that they are really reluctant to interact with them. Also, they kind of have like a negative connotation because like I'm not dead yet, like why am I
Right.
working with an estate sale company? So I find a lot of aversion among my clientele to actually talking to estate sale companies. And so the collectibles advisors sounds like a great way to go. And so these are paid professionals who probably are senior move managers or realtors or whatever. They come in and they have been trained by you, or who trains
Right.
them on doing this? You personally?
Well, so the Keys Guild on my website, I have a number of courses that teach them how to work with all the different types of material. I try not to make them experts in any one category. I do impart a lot of expertise on jewelry, coins, sterling, this type of items, because most of our clients have that. And there's no one better in the world than us as collectibles advisors to handle that material in the safety of their home, paying a much higher percentage than this industry normally pays, and helping them treasure hunt and find more of that material in their home. But I need these Keys Guild members, these keys, to recognize they're not the authority. So I teach them how to identify who we should use within our network of experts, resources, and auction houses, and bring that knowledge in. So the biggest problem any of us can have is to think we know too much about any particular topic. It would be better off to be experts on experts. So that is what the keys are all about.
Right. Well, that's how I am as a realtor. It's like, people will say like, so legally, is this true? I'm going like, well, I'm not a lawyer. So
Right.
I know a good lawyer you can talk to about that. So, well, that's actually very good advice. So, do the keys people, the keys, do they act as sort of like a project manager? Because like it's a lot of stuff, right? I mean, I heard like the average American household has like 330,000 distinct items in it, right? So like that's obviously a lot to manage. Do your members manage the whole entire process? Because if you I got to talk to like an art dealer about this, then I got to talk to a coin shop, then I got to talk to like a gun guy, right? I mean, that's a lot of talking. That's a lot of work for somebody who just wants to like downsize and have it easy. Do you guys do all a lot of that for people, or no?
It may be that because the market's so bad, it makes this much easier than it sounds. Most of the things that we encounter in people's homes is very well. For one thing, we see a lot of the same stuff or different versions of the same stuff. The tchotchkes that are sitting around, the prints on the wall, the type of furniture that people have. So it's very clear very early on that most of the things they have is not something that we can do better than the normal estate sale process. And we have to be very protective of their estate sale because this market being so bad, there's two things to know about your estate sale company. Number one, they're charging higher fees than they've ever charged, anywhere from 40 to 50% of the selling price of items. They earn it if they do a good job. It's okay. But so we need to know that the estate sale company is going to be something that charges a high percentage. They also need a lot of material to be able to afford to do this for a lot of clients. So people who think they're doing themselves a favor by little getting rid of stuff prior to their sale, kind of making progress before they do something, they may be working against themselves. They may be selling themselves right out of enough material to have a sale. So that's a real challenge that people need to think about. But it's very clear and easy to determine that most of these things will need to go in the estate sale. We bring up topics of, I mentioned earlier, if they do have any jewelry, if they do have any coins or sterling, nice watches, this type of material, those are three common things that our strategy is very clear. Let's separate that out. Let's determine what that is. Let's get you bought out at closer to 80% because the market's paying normally about 50 to 60%, and you don't want to give up 40% in an estate sale. Then we ask the client, is there anything else you have that you're concerned about? Is there anything that you have felt like for some time, for one reason or another, has a high value? Maybe you were told it had a high value when it was passed on to you. And we try to address the things they're concerned about. And then we simply tour their home. We're looking for original art, possibly. Do a quick research on the artist, make sure it's not important. We ask about guns or, maybe high value liquor or wine. These are things we may not see out in the open. So we kind of pry and try to find out what may be hidden in the closet or the drawer or in a box somewhere. But it's very easy when you do this to I guess, get through the massive stuff easily and quickly, and then start trying to focus and treasure hunt to find those things that may be a little more special.
All right, right on. Now, do you have like any like stories you can tell about any like I don't know, have you found like Cortez's gold or something like that? You have any, any
I'm
interesting
still
stories
looking.
like that?
Yeah, it's funny. Since I've been in, it sounds like I've been in this business for a long time at 20 years. It feels like it. But this is an industry that a lot of the people that have been in it a long while have been in it for 40 or 50 years. The old timers that were in it back when things were good. So my point in saying that is that most of those guys, when you encounter the old timers that remember the good old days, they lament often about how good things were and how horrible things are today. And they're quick to say, it's junk, it's crap. They're just, they just are so frustrated. I, at this point, 20 years in, am still, I don't know, have a more of a youthful thing. I still believe any client I have might have a treasure. So I'm just constantly looking and hoping that I'll find that wonderful thing in their home. We don't. We rarely find that. We may find a lot of nice jewelry or so on. I have encountered things that were fun or surprising. I had to broker a shrunken head one time, which was ghastly, fascinating at the same time. It was fun for me because when you encounter a new item that you've never worked with, it sometimes will introduce you to a new industry. And in this case, I was introduced to the oddities market, which is very strong market. And I learned how to discern the difference in a fake and a real shrunken head. We sold that shrunken head for $7,000 to a collector in California. And it was just a real fascinating thing. On the other hand, I had, back to California, I had a client here in Texas whose father was a dentist, and had passed. He lived in California. Him and his wife were going to go there, do a Zoom call with me so I could look at the things that were in the home. They were going to have an estate sale. My goal was to help them pick out anything we thought we could do better with, and they were going to rent a truck and bring it home. There were a number of really interesting things. But one of the things that I suggested they bring home was this set of three pieces of original art, a bit abstract looking. These were oil paintings. We couldn't tell who the artist was. I said, bring that along with the rest. Let's just see what we can do with it and figure out. We never did figure out the name of the artist. So I ended up putting it in an auction house that handles, a lot of stuff on a national scale, but in that, say, $500 to $1,000 range, because we didn't think these were that special. We listed them. Again, we could not make out the artist's name. It was a 7-day sale. And we expected this set to sell for around $300 to $500. But on the morning of the 7th day, I noticed the bidding had exceeded $3,000. And when I looked closely, I realized the auction house had attributed the artist's name, and it was a Chinese artist. I researched it and instantly realized that this was an extremely important up and coming artist. And this artist's work like this in a triptych 3-piece set should sell between $30,000 to $50,000. Well, that's wonderful, except it's in the wrong auction house and it's on the last day of the sale. So I was working hard to try to see if I could get this pulled, to see what we could do. But fortunately, by mid-afternoon on that day, the bidding had exceeded $32,000. And when it ended up closing, it ended up selling close to $45,000. So a wonderful success story that could have been an absolute disaster. And that was an example of how the market knows the value of stuff sometimes more than the experts do. And it was someone in the market that flagged this and let the auction house know, hey, you've got something kind of special there, and they were able to add that to it. So that was a fun story that went well for us. Um,
That's a cool story. And I understand that you've been like a guest expert on like hoarding related TV shows and that kind of thing.
yes, I was able to be a guest expert on the A&E series Hoarders.
On
uh,
hoarders itself.
Hoarders, that the actual show. Uh, I honestly, I had never seen an episode of Hoarders, so when the invitation came, and of course I took it, there's no bad press. My wife said, "Well, hey, we may want to watch one of these before you do it." And of course, after watching one episode, I wasn't sure it was a good idea. I did it. It was a lot of fun. It was sad and a disaster, but it was very interesting to be a part of a show. And last year, I was invited to be a guest expert on Discovery Channel's Filthy Fortunes. Matt Paxton is the host of that series. He was the original host of Hoarders when it first started. And the difference in these two shows was Hoarders was designed to help get people in a hoarding situation cleaned out, to give them a fresh start. In Filthy Fortunes, they're trying to get them cleaned out, but treasure hunting the hoard and trying to see if they can find anything to get them some money. And so I was in Maine for one episode and Los Angeles for another. And uh, my goal was to help them with jewelry and coins. So it was a lot of fun. It was a little bit more fun than the Hoarder show.
Right on. That's so cool. Actually, I love a good hoarder house. I've worked with a number of hoarders, and I mean, these are people who really need my help, and it's interesting to like go through a hoarder house, and when you talk to the hoarders who are just normal people, but they have like a really unhealthy attachment to stuff that they don't want. Like everything is really important to them, right? Like this magazine, I mean, sorry, this newspaper from 1974, right? This is like really important, bit of history right here. Can't get rid of that. Um,
Right.
so, but I think that what the hoarders have is something that we all have, really. I mean, because like a lot of people cling to their stuff and they just don't want to let it go. It's like the endowment effect. Have you heard about the endowment effect? Like the guy won a Nobel Prize for that, where people who own stuff, we ascribe much more value to it if it's something that we own versus something that we don't own. And so like it's innate in all people. So how what advice can you give to people who have this really strong emotional attachment to their stuff that really isn't worth hardly anything, if anything, it might even have a negative value? Like, do you have any advice? Because you probably worked with a lot of people like this.
Well, I try to tell stories for one thing. One of the things I like to do to help get people, I guess, more honest with themselves. I might mention, for instance, that there was a study done in California, if they're coming back to California, many years ago, where they were trying to determine how much of the available space in people's home does the average couple or family use on a regular basis. And so they had technology that allowed them to follow the foot traffic in their home over a specific period of time. And when it was done, you would have these dots that would be generated when so many steps were in one particular area, and you could see real clearly where all the dots were clustered when you were looking at a layout of their home. The interesting thing that came out of that was that the average family uses about 40% of their home on a regular basis, and of in those cases, most of the time was spent in the area where food was prepared and the area where food was eaten, and then the second most active traffic area was wherever the main television was. So the reason I mentioned that, and in the case where the people had garages, um, over 75% of the people who had garages were not using garages to store a vehicle. It was being used to store other stuff, which means that all the stuff that we have in our home, uh, in all this space that we don't use, really has very little value to us. We're not using it. It's just filling space. And so it helps them to stop and think, well, it is true. I don't use that stuff. It serves no purpose for me. And so it helps them to begin to be more practical about, well, what am I really using? That must be the stuff that's in the space that I'm actually spending time in. So that and any other there's a number of stories and analogies we can use to help them begin to answer the question themselves about it, their relationship with their things. And if you don't mind me sharing another story, I'll give you
Oh,
another
please
analogy
do.
that I like to talk to people when I'm speaking or talking to a family. And that is, I'll ask people to imagine um, that they're in their home, in the main room in their home, and to imagine that there is absolutely nothing else in their house. It's just barren of anything. There's nothing on the walls, nothing on the drawers, no furniture, no carpet on the floor. They're just sitting in that main room, and for the sake of the story, I would say you're sitting on a folding chair in front of a TV tray, and on that TV tray is a laptop, and beside that laptop is a stack of money. And that laptop is on a website that's called mystuff.com. Now, mystuff.com is kind of interesting because on that website, available for you to purchase, is every single thing that was in your house. So you can imagine, you mentioned earlier how many things may be in a home. So you can imagine how many things are on this website. Everything you've got with a wonderful picture and description, and the price is great. Some things are even free because the price that you can buy these things for is the exact same amount you would get if you sold it. And then it's important to know that that stack of money beside your laptop is the exact amount of money it would take to buy every single thing that was in your house back again and put it in your house. And if that were the case, the question I ask folks is, how much of that stuff would you give up the money to buy back? And when you get to thinking like that, you realize, I might not buy back very much of my stuff versus the money that its actual value. So if you wouldn't buy it back, why would you expect other people to pay much for the same type of material? So it's just getting people to maybe practically rethink, what's going on out there, the mindset behind our stuff, the value, and why we would spend money on it.
Wow, that was profound, and that is genius. Thank you so much. That's worth the price of admission on listening to this call. Just for that advice alone, I'm going to internalize that and mention that to everybody who I come across who is trying to evaluate their stuff. Because what I find is that really the stuff is way more of the issue than anything else, right? When it comes time to like downsizing or just moving in general, right? Because they're like, how do I get all my stuff to wherever I'm going next, right? And what I tell people is throw it away. It's not worth anything. Just don't, I mean, recycle it, donate it. You can't really sell it. But I find that is what really keeps people stuck in their houses is the stuff. It's not so much like if the house were empty and they still live there, they'd have much less reason to not sell their house. Have you found that to be the case, that really people are worried more about getting rid of their stuff than the actual house itself?
Absolutely. I wasn't aware of that until I started doing this work. As a matter of fact, I got my realtor's license after doing this because I realized that the work I was doing, I was helping people with the stuff first because it was the most important part of it. And once I had established that relationship with them and asked them, have you picked your realtor yet? And they said, no. Well, I had enough of a relationship to say, well, I've got a great one. So then I could become a referring agent. And I have had a number of homes go full cycle as the referring agent. And that's why I think, collectibles advising is good for even realtors. So yes, I definitely think that the stuff gets in the way. One of the biggest sources of my business in the Dallas-Fort Worth area comes from mid to high-end active senior communities. They have me on the top of their vendor list. So when somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to take a tour. I've heard about this place. I'm curious about what it'd be like to move here. Or my friends live here. They're trying to talk me into moving here. We'd like to take a look. They're like, that's great. By the way, you need to talk to Charles Tinsley. I want him to come out and talk to you about things like your stuff. And the reason they do that is because they know that if they get someone who's really interested, they're thinking about moving, they know that one of the first things that will derail that process is they get home, they're like, boy, that'd be fun to live at that place. What would we have to do? Well, we'd have to get rid of our stuff. They don't know where to start. they're overwhelmed and saying, maybe it's just not the right time for us to do it. So if I can come in and demystify that, help them navigate that, help arm them with knowledge and resources, a lot of them will decide to make sure that the stuff doesn't get in their way. And listen, here's some great news. I don't mean I'm not selling real estate here, but the great news for most of us in most markets since this huge decline in values is that over that period of time, our home values in most cases have gone up. The great news is that our home values are up more than our stuff values are down. So if most people in today's market were to sell their home in this market and give everything in their house away, they're still ahead of the game. So anything they get for their stuff is just icing on the cake. And that is a great starting point for a client, is to help them agree to that, and recognize that that is the truth. And then they don't feel like that this is a bad move right now, that actually maybe it's a great time to do it, because their real treasure, their greatest treasure for most people is that property, that home that they own.
Yeah, that's true. So, I just want to ask you this question. So, a couple of weeks ago, I met a lady who was 101 years old, and she had owned her house for 72 years. And in the last 15 years, she told me that she's hardly been out of her bedroom. She's still sharp, she's still, can carry on a good conversation, but just has limited mobility. And her home was filled with like curios, right? She had those dolls that you mentioned. What was those dolls? That such an H
Hummels, Yadros,
Hummels.
Hummels,
Yeah, she
yeah.
had a whole shelf full of those, right? And she had a whole bunch of crystal, and like she had some nice silverware and stuff like that was there. But in the end, and she is somebody who definitely, I think, should move to assisted living, because she would be a lot happier, right? I mean, she
Mhm.
has the money. She's 101 years old. Like, what are you waiting for? Like, why don't you go out and live your life with a bunch of fun seniors, right? In the, cruise ship that goes on land, right? And she
Right.
decided not to because of the stuff, right? That was it. She was worried about, like, what will I do with all my stuff? And how do I make sure that I don't get ripped off by like the estate sale company? That was her big thing. And she's like, I'm just going to lose too much money on my stuff. What would you give to like that person specifically? What advice would you give them? Would you do the TV tray thing and the laptop?
I
That
might,
seems like,
if I feel like that they would follow my story. But to be honest with you, I would talk to them in terms of um, making sure they understand that they have options. I would tell that lady, obviously in that home, there's probably a lot of material, maybe some very fun, interesting stuff that would be great for an estate sale. And I would let her know, let's don't worry about what each thing is going to sell for, because we can't really control that. But let's pick a path that you can be comfortable with. And in order for you to be comfortable with it, you're going to have to be comfortable with whoever it is that's going to do this project for you. So if we decide, let's do an estate sale, before you do the estate sale, I'm going to help spot check some things that to make sure that we don't have a Tiffany lamp sitting over here, or we don't have a special piece of art. I'm going to talk to you about your jewelry. I'm going to go through my favorite thing in the world, and that's all your costume and junk jewelry, because I always find hundreds or thousands of dollars hidden in that. I'm going to, if you have coins or you have sterling or you have jewelry, all the things, we're going to address that. We're going to find any treasures that we think we can do better through another resource, and I'm going to help get that handled for you. And then let's talk to some different estate sale companies that have a good reputation in your market. Your realtor will have some suggestions of people that she's had a lot of success with. But let's pick out 2 or 3 of those to come in and meet with you and see if you like them. Let's make sure, for instance, because this happens too much today, an estate sale company will come in and they'll look at the stuff and they'll say, yeah, yeah, we'll do your estate sale. I mean, sure, they're just like, it's just a lot of work, but hey, yeah, we'll do it for you. So let's make sure not to use them. Let's try to find someone who seems to talk intelligently about the items you have, and let's try to find somebody who seems very excited about getting the opportunity to work with your treasures. And if you like them, let's don't worry about exactly how much you're going to get. Let's just let them do their job. Trust it'll go well, and then put your energy towards this big, wonderful treasure, which is your home. So just again, giving them options like that, encouraging them to find their path and not to get too deep into the weeds about what each thing will go for, but rather what's the best overall path to get you a result that you'll be happy with.
All right. Well, that's terrific. So, the Keys Guild, you said you're not everywhere in the country. So, are there particular parts of the country that you are have a lot of folks in, like the Bay Area, perhaps, or where are your members located?
We do have a lot of members in California. We have a lot of members in the Northeast, in and around Connecticut, and over on the East Coast. And then we just have spotty coverage throughout the country. We've got a little over 300 members, and eventually we'll have thousands. We're just so young at this point. So if someone, for instance, has a question about a thing or a situation, they're welcome to contact me. I have resources in places I may not have a key. So if they ask me about something and I can connect them with a resource there, I'm happy to do that. Or I may use it as an opportunity to develop a key in their market. So, but other than that, again, realtors are a great resource because they're working with so many homes. Two different resources I think that would be great for anyone to find these solutions. The realtor, a good realtor, in my opinion, is going to be working with known good commodities in their market. If you have a senior move managing company in your area, they quite often will work with a lot of good resources in your area and have solutions. So those are two of the most common places that I encourage people to talk with and ask them for advice about, who are the best people to work with in their market.
All right, terrific. So you do consultations. So like, do you like, could someone hold up like an iPad or whatever and like have like you go through the house sort of a little bit with Zoom? Do you guys do that ever or?
I do that from time to time. Fortunately, their phone is a great tool to help me look at things. Sometimes they'll have to help me. I may say, "Well, I like that piece of pottery there, that vase. Can you turn that over and either show it to me or tell me what it says on the bottom?" Between me and the person working the phone and the phone itself, you'd be amazed how much I can get done for them. Usually, when I work with someone who's not in my market, they're usually extremely happy to have someone talk to them and help them and answer questions, but they usually have a much better grasp of the process. The better grasp of what we just have got to get them over their fears. I talked to so many of my clients that have gone through the downsizing and then asked them afterwards, well, you were very worried about some things you were getting rid of. How do you feel now? And so many of them would be like, what things? The fear for an elderly person of transitioning is not just leaving their stuff that they're comfortable with, that they're surrounded with, but actually there's a lot of pieces to that. What it's going to be like to be at this new place. How many things have to be done while I'm doing this? The whole thing is overwhelming, but for most people, almost to a person, when I ask them afterwards, they're like, it was not nearly as bad as I thought it was. So picking your solutions, talking to as many as you need to find those that you're comfortable with, let them do their job. I'll give them tips like, don't worry about the stuff you're not taking. You'd be amazed how often people get kind of worked up about, well, what do I do with all the linens in this closet? Well, are you keeping them? No. Well, leave them right where they're sitting, and let the estate sale company decide what they're going to do with them to do this. Well, okay, but what do I do with all these tools out here in the garage? And I'll say, are you keeping them? No. So again, once I let them know, don't spend any time worrying about the stuff that you're not taking. Just focus on the things you are taking and your plan and path to get to your new place. It seems to be calming for an awful lot of people. So that's just one example.
Well, that's very solid advice. So, Charles, how can people get a hold of you if they want to talk to you further about the collectible stuff and everything we've talked about here today?
Well, the website's thekeysguild.com, so they can certainly find me there. They're welcome to call me. I don't know if you have the ability to put my number.
I sure can. What's your number?
817-454-2446. So between the website, which has that contact information as well, and that number, people can certainly call me or text me, get hold of me. And I do stay busy, but I'll get back with them as quick as possible to answer the questions. I will say that just from my perspective, I think it's important to say that the most interesting thing that I encounter in almost every house that I work is the people that live there. When you do the work I do, working with stuff, and you hear the stories about the people and you're meeting them, they begin to tell a story when they're combined of this person, their interests, their journey. So I hope most people realize that them, uh, their stories, these things meant to them, they're the most important and the most interesting thing in their house. And it's really important for us in the industry to make sure we don't miss that, because it would be a waste for us to miss that.
Wow, that's really solid advice and very profound. And I totally agree. All right, Charles. Hey, thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the flip side.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.